Hello, my name is Yüksel Serindag, and I'm a member of the New York City Kurdish Cultural Center. This event is a part of a talk and interview series that the New York City Kurdish Cultural Center has been conducting. Today, I would like to welcome Mamosta Fexrî. He is a Kurdish linguist and teacher. He provides both in-person and online Kurdish language instructions in New York City. By the way, Mamoste means in Kurdish magister, Fexrî, or teacher. And this is an honorific title for someone who is an expert in a subject area. Welcome.
Sachavan.
Zor spas. I hope that I acknowledge you adequately. If you want to add something about yourself, please go ahead.
Sachavan. So my name is Fexrî. I am from Ahmed, born and raised in Ahmed in village, and I'm a native Kurmanji speaker. But as well as I have knowledge on the other Kurdish dialect, the Zazaki, Saurani, Kalhuri, and I'm eager to become fluent on all the dialects, and hopefully I will learn Haurami as well. And I have been living in United States in past 18 years, a little bit over 18 years. And I lived all around United States, like in the East Coast, in the Central and West Coast.
When I met you, okay, so I was, first of all, it really struck me that you knew so many languages. You talk in Spanish to the waiters or waiter in a restaurant when we were together during that film festival week in New York City. So you spoke fluently Spanish, and then you communicated Spanish with the waiter at the restaurant. And then you also know other languages, right? Such as, English, Spanish, Turkish, and what other languages do you?
So I know Portuguese, to be more specific, Brazilian Portuguese, and I do understand Catalan. I do understand Italian and French. I used to be way better in French, but my French is kind of dusty now, or rusty, I would say. I used to speak much better. And I do know some Farsi as well. I can read, and I know, like, I would say advanced Farsi. I'm in advanced Farsi as well. And then I am now learning Baluchi and Hebrew. And I have some knowledge on Chinese, Mandarin to be more specific, and then some knowledge on, I would say, Germanic languages, because I studied German, Swedish, and Faroese, or
Friesen.
Yes.
Friesen in northern Germany and northern
Not region, Faroese. Faroe Islands, so is like only 50,000-60,000 people speak the language, is very close to Icelandic.
So where does this talent come from?
I don't know, it's just hobby, I would say.
Okay. You said you studied German, or were you what's your did you study German at the university level, or
Yes, in the college, when I was taking college classes, they were offering, they were non-credit classes, and I took non-credit. I took actually Urdu, I took Uzbek, I took German.
May I ask where?
And University of Wyoming.
Okay. So in the States, you were okay. In the States. Okay. Let's go back to Kurdish. You know, you are well versed in many languages, and so since you know many languages, right? So, and then you probably in your mind you always compare, I would guess, Kurdish with other languages, right? So it's,
Yeah.
I do that all the time, okay? So when I read something in English or in German, I'm trying to learn Latin for my work, but then I think at the same time of Kurdish. Okay, oh, okay, what is that in Kurdish? How is that in Kurdish? So it makes me think all the time. Going back to that, what is Kurdish? For people who don't know what it is. I mean, a lot of people nowadays know what the Kurds and Kurdistan, where they live and so on. So what is Kurdish?
So Kurdish is, in the long story short, is distance relative of English or German or Spanish. But if we go, is because it's one of the Indo-European language. Be more specific is Indo-Aryan, and be more specific Iranian. And a lot of people, they get this confusion. When you say Iran, they think maybe it's only Farsi. No, Iranian, such as Kurdish, Farsi, Pashto, Baluchi, Tati, Talish, Mazandaran, Gilaki, and so on. So there is, the umbrella is huge. And the closest to Iranian language would be Aryan languages, which is like Urdu, Punjabi, Gujarati, Bahari, Nepali, and so on. So those are very close to Kurdish. You will see a lot of elements of like Urdu or Hindi or Punjabi. You're going to see a lot of similarities with Kurdish because they are very similar to each other. And if we go like in the umbrella, we go like in Baluchi, you're going to see a lot of similarities, Baluchi and Kurdish. And if we compare Talish, Talish is going to have a lot of similarities with Zazaki.
What is Talish? I'm sorry, can you also, when you talk about these languages, would be also nice if you say, okay, Talish is, let's say, from this area, so that our
Talish,
know.
yes,
what
Talish is spoken in two different countries. One of them in Iran by the Caspian Sea. Those are the way a lot of people, they would classify them as a Caspian languages. Another one is gonna be in Azerbaijan, Astara region. So unfortunately in Iran, it doesn't have any recognition or any status, but in Azerbaijan, in Astara region, until, if I'm not mistaken, until third grade, you can study in Talish. So it has some semi status, I would say, in Azerbaijan.
So Kurdish is a cognate language with other languages such as European, Indo-European, Indo-Iranian languages. So it is when from Bangladesh to Kurdistan,
yes,
that region or people speaking Indo-European languages have the same numbers, right? Yek, du, se, char, 1, 2, 3, 4.
yes. So even if we go, like if we go in the Sistan Baluchistan in Iran, in the eastern Iran, the border in Pakistan, and we go to Baluchistan region in Pakistan, and we go to Afghanistan, these three, and they're like in Kurdistan, they're divided by three different countries, Iran, Afghanistan, and Baluchistan, I mean in Pakistan, and they're going to have a lot of similarities with Kurmanji, and they have three different dialects, and they have, of course, sub-dialects like Kurdish has, because it's not Kurdish. We like in the past 40 years, 30 years, 40 years, we started working on standardization of Kurdish. Some of the dialects still we're working on it. Some of the dialects is basically we got the standardization and is ready to go, like Kurmanji and Sorani and Zazaki, Kelhuri, and Haurami. We're still working on those dialects to be standardized. Baluchi even is worse than us, I would say. Like they have three main dialects, and all the dialects, they are mutually, the good things about, like, let's say, put it in Baluchi, the good things, they are mutually intelligible.
Okay, so when you say standardization of the dialects of the language, can you expound on that? So what do you mean by that?
So standardization, like for instance, like I live in Ahmed, and if it's not standardized, it's gonna be like I'm going to Agiri, or I'm going to Duhok, or Urmiye, Maku, Salmas. I go to some part of the other part of Kurdistan. the written language and spoken language, it would be different than the one spoken in Ahmed. But when you have standardized, everybody's gonna write in one grammatical, one written language. So that's gonna minimize all the dialectal variation. So you're gonna still have the dialect, but as like, for instance, we give example of Italian. Italian used to have a lot of different dialects, and they choose one as a standardized language, like Florence in Italy, and then they start to using that as a like model. So, and then they start to choosing that, and they start to working on that. And if the other dialect has vocabulary, they would add to the Florence Italian, and then they start to working on that, and that's become standardized written language to avoid all the confusion and miscommunication and everything. So in Kurdish, that's why we say like in Kurmanji, now we choose like a Jalalat Badr Khan and Badr Khan family, the one who's first started working on Kurdish grammar and everything. They choose Botan, Jazira Botan dialect, because that's where they were from, and they choose that dialect, and we start to, based on that, we start to expanding and we start to standardizing Kurdish.
So if you say that standardization of the dialects of the language, so let's say, is that the purpose is create a synthesis of a language between from Sorani and Kurmanji as Sormanj, okay, Spanglish, Sormanj, Sorani Kurmanji, Sormanj, Zazaki Kurmanji, Zazmanj. Is that what you mean?
No, I would
okay.
go with the what, like for instance, Zazaki, you cannot Zazaki would be one on dialect, on branch, everything. So you standardize that dialect, whatever, like for instance, you go to Dersim, you go to Piran, you go to Chaulik, some areas, mainly they're gonna be speaking Zazaki. So you will introduce Kurmanji there, and you will they will take Zazaki as well. So as the time goes, slowly you're gonna see some of the dialects fading away, taking over the other dialects. But you cannot just say like, okay, you cannot speak your dialect, you have to speak this dialect. You have to standardize both dialects and let them to decide by time which dialect they're gonna choose over the other dialect, which dialect is gonna take over the other dialect.
So does this mean that by doing that, or during that process, a subculture is vanished? Can we say that? Let's say the problem, like let's say Germany. There is one specific section, part of Germany, it's Hanover, in the north of Germany. And then there are so many dialects, such as Bavarian dialect, or places, areas close to the Netherlands. Okay, it's different. Cologne, and that area, it's lowland, close to the Netherlands, have a different dialect. So by doing that, by introducing Hanoverian dialect, which is called Hochdeutsch, and you might lose in the, I mean, in the future, whatever. So then the culture, the subculture of that language, of that dialect, is that what we want?
Is that not really what we want, I would say, but as the time goes, people will choose one dialect over another dialect. Like for instance, I can talk about Spanish in Spain. You have Asturian, you have Leonese, you have Galician, and a lot of things. Like some of them, they start to losing ground. For instance, Leonese, Asturian, they start to losing ground because that was under the Franco and because of the political problem was going on and the language was illegal. But now people, they're choosing Spanish over their own dialect because Spanish is spoken in a lot of different countries, and a lot of people, they're just choosing. But some of them, like for instance, Catalan and Galician, they do not want to. They know Spanish, but they wanted to stick to their own dialect. So like my idea, I think Kurdistan can have similar idea or similar geography. Like for instance, if Zazaki speakers, they stick to Zazaki, they can stick to Zazaki as long as the kids are spoken. The kids are speaking the language and the language is spoken in that region. But if the language is losing ground, then they are going to choose one dialect. It can be Kurmanji, it can be Sorani, whatever it is. But like we lost the train that you have one dialect, one language or one dialect. So now we have to choose every dialect as own language, like own culture, subculture, and that's part of what it makes Kurdish rich, because Zazaki has something that Kurmanji doesn't have it. Kurmanji has some that Zazaki doesn't have it. Sorani has some that both dialect lacks. So I wouldn't say like just choose one dialect over the other one. Let the history decide and let the people decide in the future.
That's right. Since I am both a Kurmanji and Zazaki speaker, but my Kurmanji is better than my Zazaki. Let's say, for example, the word morning in Kurmanji, as far as I know, it's Swe, which is from Arabic sabah, right? But in Zazaki, it's a different word. It's called shoulder. Shoulder is the morning. Even in Kurmanji, when you say tomorrow, it's again called sabah, sua, means the next day. Again, it's from the word sabah in Arabic. But in Zazaki, it's called meshte. It's tomorrow. So, of course, as an amateur linguist in my mind, I say, okay, let's replace sue, which is, is not, I'm just playing in my mind, okay? So with the words, with meshte, and the words that, let's say, haypeywin, which is interview, in Zazaki, there is no, at least, I think there is no word interview yet. So it's pure, let's say pure Zazaki, okay? So, okay, then Zazaki can also borrow words from Kurmanji because it's more written in Zazaki, in Kurmanji. That's why. So it's just, I play with things in my mind. So it's, yeah.
So like for Sabah, a lot of people, they now we are start to replacing with Bahtini, Sorani word Bayani.
Bayani, yes.
Which is morning as well. We start to replacing, and a lot of word like that, we start to replacing with Sorani and Sorani, some of them, they start to replacing their word, and they start to adopting Kurmanji, and Kurmanji adopting Sorani. If you look at it, those two dialects are more close to each other than Zazaki, putting Zazaki and Kurmanji next to each other. Yeah. So you're gonna see like a lot of people, they start to adopting Kurmanji words. And then same with the Kurmanji, like we say serkeftin, like good luck or so serkeftin, if you look at it in Kurmanji, we do have serkeftin, but a lot of people, they do not use. That's come from serkeftin. Serkeftin is a Sorani one, but Kurmanji we say is, if you look at it, serkeftin. So that's the original one, but a lot of people, they start to using serkeftin over serkeftin. You're gonna see a lot of them, they don't know the meaning. They just see in the social media, on TV or on the news, they start to using it. Like one of the example I give is zor spas. A lot of people, they say gelek zor spas, which is that they repeating themselves. Zor in Sorani is mean gelek, like a lot, very much. So a lot of people, they do not know what zor means in Sorani, and they're using another words in Kurmanji, which is identical word, repeating themselves.
Just very detailed remark when you said zor spas and gelek spas. I think I read Mehmet Emin Bozarslan's years ago, his article about spas, zor spas, gelek spas. He refused gelek spas, as far as I remember correctly, okay? He said, it's zor spas, not gelek spas. Am I correct? And by the way, he's also from your area, right? So your area breeds breeds linguists.
Yeah. So I would say like Gelek Ispas, not Gelek, but Gelek Ispas is more correct one.
Yeah.
We could use Gelek Ispas, like Zor Spas, you could use it because, and if you go like Spas, I have read it, like some people, they say Spas is come from Sepas, Separasten. It's come from Zoroastrian, like good deeds and everything. If you look at that, it's come from that. A lot of people, they saying, some people, they say, no, it's come from Avestan. So that's kind of, everybody's going to give different meaning. But like, as I said, I talked to, and I read some, it says it's come from Sepas, Separasten. 3 times like to protecting or preserving.
So not from Russian, spasiba.
No.
No. Okay. So just want to make sure. Okay. So how does Kurdish now fare in Kurdistan and in the diaspora, among the Kurdish communities in diaspora and in Kurdistan? So I mean, when I say Kurdistan, in southern Kurdistan, which is Iraqi Kurdistan, in Rojava Kurdistan, in eastern Kurdistan, and in northern Kurdistan, which is in Turkish Kurdistan. So how does Kurdish fare in these countries?
So unfortunately, in some region, I would say it's flourishing, some region is fading away. Like in northern Kurdistan, we know because of the governments and everything, the Kurdish is start to dying, is a lot of region, a lot of areas is fading away.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, I'll give an example from my city, from Ahmed. Some villages, like when I was growing up, the Kurdish, like Turkish was not spoken basically. Turkish was barely people knew. If they knew, like some people, they knew, they were not fluent in Turkish. But now it's opposite. Now the Kurdish, a lot of people, they're not fluent in Kurdish anymore. Because the Kurdish, they think like speaking Turkish is give them like they're modern, and they're listening that the government propaganda that's saying Kurdish is a primitive language, is a language that is not spoken by modern people, and a lot of things. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they're following that blindly. Being said, but if we look at in sorry, in Bashur, like Duhok and Zahod, the Kurdish is flourishing there, Kurmanji specifically. And Rojava now, after the Rojava revolution, the Kurdish language start to get in status and start to being taught in schools. So there is a famous quote by Michael Shayed, the Kurdish linguist. He says, the language that the kids doesn't speak doesn't have future. Do not have a future. So if you look at it in Bakur, unfortunately, a lot of kids, they do not speak this language anymore. But if we look at Rojava, they do go to school, they speak this dialect, and they study in this dialect. So therefore, the language is start to flourish in there. But I cannot say the same thing for Bakur. And if we look at it in Iran, like in Roshalat, like if we look at Maku, Urmiye, Salmas, Khoy, all those regions, they speak Kurmanji, and the Kurmanji is flourishing there, is not losing ground, because like we have to compare that is not illegal language to speak. Let's put it that way. And then you go to the enclave in Khorasan, which is the furthest point Kurdish speakers, Kurmanji speakers. There are border with Turkmenistan, and there are 2-3 million native Kurmanji speakers there. And they were sent to exile about 300-400 years ago, and they still preserve their culture and language. They still speak their dialect. They still speak their language. And when it's come to diaspora, unfortunately, diaspora, they do not give that importance to the language. They don't see the Kurdish language as to something to study on, something to pass to the next generation. And they don't want, a lot of times, like I've been teaching Kurdish for over 10 years. Unfortunately, majority of my students are not Kurdish, are foreigners. I had Spaniards, I had Portuguese, I had Brazilian, I had Mexican, I had from all over the world, but I barely get Kurdish students. They are indifferent when it's come to the Kurdish, unfortunately. And they do not see that the Kurdish language, that is their heritage and is the biggest part of their identity is their language. Like they do not understand once they lose the language, they lose the big chunk of their identity.
It is quite interesting. Yes, I was just in my hometown last summer. Even in the villages, the kids, they speak, I would say, very, very good Turkish. Okay.
Yes.
And that it breaks, or it broke my heart. It really broke my heart. Of course, it's nice to learn other language, but only if you first your mother tongue, okay, and then other languages, as in Europe, right? You speak Spanish, French, other languages, Dutch, and so on, along with your own mother tongue. So, and that is, I mean, the Kurdish language in northern Kurdistan somehow is, I mean, it's alarming situation right now. I read in a book which is written by a teacher, director of a Turkish girls' high school in Harput, Elazığ, and she was appointed by the Turkish government to teach, to snap the Kurdish girls from their families, parents, and educate in modern life. And she goes in her memoirs. If you have time, please read it. In her memoirs, her name is Sıdıka Avar. In her memoirs, she writes about that situation, about that incident. And she goes to a township of Bingöl, which is my area. And she was also educated in the US. So, and then she was appointed to become the principal of the school in Elazığ. She goes to the township of Adaklı now. At the time, it was called Aznapert, a village. And she cannot communicate with people at the time, okay? I mean, she doesn't know Kurdish, and the villagers do not know Turkish. So, and she sees a radio in the the house of the headman, of the Muhtar. And in an American accent, she says, "Oh, radio," not radio, "Oh, radio." And the Muhtar, the headman of the village says, "Yes, ma'am." So it happened that the Muhtar was also in America, okay? Because a lot of Kurds from that area came to the US a century ago. Over 50,000 people, okay? Imagine that. A century ago came to the US. So then Muhtar and that woman, the principal, they talk in English, not in Turkish, not other languages, but in English. So what I'm trying to say is, up until 50 years ago, 60 years ago, not many, very few people knew Turkish. So, so I guess in a way, unfortunately, we have lost the momentum. Okay, so that's very sad. Anyhow, so to what extent can or is Kurdish utilized in literature and in scientific discourses?
So as we know, like Kurdish, unfortunately, was illegal to speak. So when something was illegal, you do not let that language to flourish. You stop the language to advance. But that's being said, still Kurdish is very rich language. Like for instance, I do collect some words that are dying out. So we have like some words for when the time of a goat give a birth until the goats become 3 years. Every 3 months or every 6 months, you have different name for that animal.
Can you please give them example?
So for instance, I'll give the example for sheep, like you say berch, you say kaver, hogech. You have bergir, and then you have pez. So as you go, you have the name changing. Like for the cow, the same thing. Like for instance, we say golek, and after golek is become parone, nogen, manga, or chelek. So each steps, if every 6 months, every 1 year, the animal grows, the name changes. And every single, like when we come to all those herbs and every single like herbs and every single weed in Kurdistan, we had name for it. So when I went out in my village, I knew every single herb's name, every single one of them. And then some of them, like when they're small, the name is different. When they grow up, the name changes. Like same with the wheat, for instance. When the wheat, every time it grows, the name changes with it. You put a different name for it. So that shows like the language is really rich because every step of that growing and everything, the language, you start to get in different words. Same with the water, same with the houses, same a lot of things like in nature, because we live in the villages mainly. And then every time you walk in you see the animal, we had names for the animal and body part and everything, you had different name for it. Like a lot of languages, they do not have it. They would get from Latin or something. In Kurdish, it was different. We had name for it. So we had it was a rich language. But as I say, and then in literature, we did have a lot of literature and old, but you have to know that when the Republic of Turkey was the declared Republic of Turkey, they went to the villages and a lot of them, they burned so many books. And those, all of them, they were 400, 500 years old books. Like I'll give an example from my village. My great-grandfather was an imam in the village, well-known imam. He had 2 rooms full of books written in Kurdish poetry, literature, and everything. And unfortunately, they had to get rid of them because at that time, if they found those books with you, the punishment was like they would hang you. And unfortunately, a lot of them, they had to, for their life and sake of their kids and families' life, they had to get rid of those books. And some of them has survived. Some of them, unfortunately, didn't make it to today.
So what in the diaspora, what can we do so to advance the Kurdish language?
You have to speak, and we need linguists. We need people to study on Kurdish language. We need people to look who knows like different languages to compare Kurdish with the other languages, to do the lexical dictionaries, see how much Kurdish is cognate with the other languages. Like for instance, if you are fluent in German, then do some work on German and Kurdish, compare both, and then try to come up with a method that German speakers, I would say for Kurdish, who speaks German, for them to be able to learn Kurdish and have come up with a different method and then speak your language, because that's your language, that's your heritage. If you don't speak, nobody else is going to speak your language.
But as far as institutionalizing or institutions, I mean, we live in the US, right? And we come together, we speak in Kurdish and we talk about it, but we still haven't founded an institution to do things for the Kurdish language. That's what I meant by that. So it's how can we create that?
So that's going to need a lot of, unfortunately, it's going to need budget for that. And a lot of people, working class and everything, they don't have that money to put in, I would say. A lot of people, they do not have that like monetary freedom to put it
Yes.
in.
Yeah.
So if we have that, it would be better and it would be easier. Like we could, like, we don't have to create a new one. We can go and talk to the existing institution like Sazia Zamane Kurdi in Rojava, for instance, the movement for Kurdish language. We could easily open one of their branch in United States and start to working on it, and then use that as a like model, and then work with them hand in hand, and then start to try to improve in United States, and then like go for the English speakers. We don't have to like create a new one. We can just adopt the existing one.
For example, I just read in the news that the Kurdish library in Sweden is going to close down. So, and that is in Sweden. Okay, so which supports any kind of Kurdish cultural activities or events. If they close down, or just if they close the Kurdish library, or I'm sorry, the Kurdish broadcasting. I'm sorry, the
Yes.
Kurdish broadcasting.
National TV, national
Yes.
radio channel, I think. Yes.
Oh, it is, yeah, it's a big problem. I mean, in Germany, for example, there's hundreds and thousands of millions of Kurds in Germany, in other countries in Europe, and they have not somehow had the chance, or let's say Kurdish broadcastings. They have not even have that. Okay, so they
There are a couple things to that. One of them is like the government won't give funding or anything unless you have a high demand for it. And unfortunately, as I say, we do not have high demand in a lot of diaspora. Like in United States, in the past 4 or 5 years, and I work in the law office because of that, I know that, and then I followed American politics very closely. And we see a lot of Kurds coming through the border, the first language when they come through the border, instead of asking for Kurdish translator or Kurdish language, they're going easy path and they're asking for Turkish. And now when you come through the border, now they have Turkish in place.
Yes, yeah.
Unfortunately, but we do not have Kurdish. Why? Because a lot of Kurdish speakers, when they come, they do not choose Kurdish as like the language that their native tongue, or they wanted to hear all the announcement, everything in Kurdish. And when the government sees that, the government would go by demand. If you have higher demand, the government would hire people who speaks Kurdish. The government would come up with the Kurdish speakers and everything. But once you do not choose, the government don't see anything in it, and the government would not elect that. Like, for instance, in the state of New York, last week, I sent a petition. I sent petition to the Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV, to put the Kurdish in the test. But I don't know whether we're gonna be able to have them put the Kurdish in the test when you want to take the for the driver's license. I'm working on it, and I offer them to all the translation and everything with no cost to the state. But as I say, is only one person. I don't think so. The state is gonna move forward with it. We need so many people to demand that from the state.
So what is the duty of the Kurdish intellectuals then in this case?
So
to create institutions, or how to go about?
So what I would like ask for your official, for like, if you, let's say you live in New York, start a petition, start to talking to your officials and put Kurdish and recognize Kurdish and get funds from the government for Kurdish language and Kurdish culture and everything. So once you high demand, the government usually, I would talk about the United States, not the Europe, because I don't know how the European system works, but the United States is by demand. When you sign the petition, you send it to your official, like congressman, congresswoman, or senators, or consular in the city hall and everything. That's how you start to put in the language into like getting recognition for the language and start to getting fun for the language.
You mentioned that the various an animal in various stages has a different name. That made me think of a Kurdish word which I love. Okay, so one of them, which is a pregnant woman. The name of, the term for a pregnant woman is Dugani. The woman in my community would say, that woman is a Dugani. That means two lives.
Yeah, Dujani. Yeah.
Yes. The which is beautiful, right? It's two lives is the term for pregnancy.
There are a lot of things like in that, like in Kurdish, like for instance, for wife, in Sorani you say Hafsar, and in Kurmanji you say Havjin.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, have is together, Jin is life, together life. So
Yes.
if you look at it, we have a lot of words like that. Like for instance, for sweat, we say Huedan. Hue is salt and dan is given.
Yes.
Like when you sweat, you literally give salt away. So a lot of words you will see is like that. Kurdish is logical language, and you can sometimes you will see compound words and everything is just mind-blowing. Like for instance, when you go out and it's cold and you start to getting cold and you say min sarma khwar. Literally you say I ate the cold. And a lot of expression like that. Kurdish has a lot of expression because we have to know that Kurdish was written language, but it was like always has some illegal element of it. So because like the oppressors, they always criminalized the language, and the oral tradition in Kurdish got flourished. And because of that, we have a lot of things in Kurdish. I don't know, like we say like Dujani in our region, as I say, like we have the colloquial way, we say it's sick because of the kid. So, and you
yes.
Yes, because of the kid, she's sick. So a lot of other things, the way we're gonna put it is different than a lot of other languages.
When you just mentioned compound words, I have thought about it all the time. One of them is domast.
Mm-hmm.
It's from torak and mast, right? As far as I know. It's a compound word of domast. It's yogurt, labne. It's labne.
Yep.
Torak or mast is then domast. That's how I interpret, but I might be wrong. So,
yep.
It's
like we have one, for instance, you say sincere. In my region, we use debra de. De, bra, de. De is mother, bra is brother, is like brother, and like is sincere like your brother and mother when you see someone. So we call debra de. So a lot of words you could see in Kurdish. So, and then Kurdish and other things about Kurdish, when you speak Kurdish, is rhyming. The Kurdish is a poetic language. It rhymes a lot.
The other day, I either heard you or read or something. You mentioned that the article in Kurdish, right? And can you just give a few examples? Article and then the let's say if is there article in Kurdish in the Kurdish language?
Yes, absolutely. So we have I would say we have like definite, indefinite articles. And then we have something we call in Tori region, but we call like enclaves in Toristan, but we still say this is part of standardized language. Like for instance, we say havale men. or braye men. Braye men is like my brother of mine. So this is definite article. We know who we talking about. The brother of mine, basically. My
Okay.
brother. And then we say braye kimen. That's indefinite article. A brother of mine. So you have more than one brother and you're talking about one of them. And then you have brakenin men. So which is like some of my brothers. So that's mean you have a big family and you're talking about some of them. And some region, instead of they say brakenin men, they say hen braken men. Some of my brother. So that's like a plural indefinite article. And the singular indefinite article, brakemen.
Where is Tori region?
Tori region is scratched from Midyat Merdin, some part of Merdin, to Khazak Batman, to until Qamishlo and that area. That's called Tori region.
So, Mamosta, who's your which poet do you like most?
In which dialect?
In Kurmanji.
In Kurmanji would be
other yes. Okay, Jigarkhun.
Jigarkhun. So Jigarkhun was born in Merdin, but grew up in Qamishloke and passed away, if I'm not mistaken, in Sweden.
Yes, in 1984.
Yeah, 1980 in Sweden, yeah. So he's one of my favorite, and a lot of his songs, a lot of his poem, it become songs. Like the most famous one that all of us we know, Kina.
Kina, yes. Yeah.
And if you look at the book, this book is called Kima S. So basically it's come from this book. And then in Sorani, I would say Hejar Mukuriani, Hemen Mukuriani, Abdullah Peshew, and Sherko Bekas, Piramid. I like that poetry too. That beautiful poetry. And in Zazaki, Ihsan, I think his name is Ihsan. Not Ihsan. I forgot. Ispar. His last name Ispar. He lives, if I'm not mistaken, in Sweden as well. I like his poetry, his singing. I mean, his poetry in Zazaki. I really like his poetry as well. And I forgot his full name. His last name is Ispar, I believe.
Speaking of Zazaki poems, Sheikh Mahdi from Cholig has beautiful poems. I don't know whether you're familiar with his poems or not. It's really beautiful. The one is Zeranj, which means cow in Kurmanji. Zeranj is about Kurdistan. It's the imagery of Kurdistan is in Zeranj. Okay, I suggest that you read that poem. And unfortunately, he passed away youngish, very youngish. So it's just beautiful poems. Okay, he has written beautiful poems. Yeah, yeah.
That would be great. I would love to like. Still, I'm discovering a lot of poetry, a lot of things in a lot of books and a lot of linguists in Kurdish. And unfortunately, some of them, they passed away and we never heard about them or something.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. And some of them, we start to finding out about them. Like one of them, for instance, Abdurrahman Akhtapi, he passed away in 1910. And he wrote, I think, more than 30 books, 30, 40 books. And I believe 13 or 15 of them survived to today. And in his time, he was very intellectual and he gave importance to Kurdish. And when he was writing in Kurdish, a lot of people, they were asking him, why aren't you writing in Arabic? Why are you writing in Kurdish? He said, because the Kurdish is a sweet language. You don't know how beautiful Kurdish sounds and how beautiful Kurdish is. I could write in Arabic and everybody could understand, but I'm going to write in this beautiful language so that one day my great-grandson or somebody would take advantage of this beautiful poetry and this beautiful language.
And he was, I guess, way ahead of his time when he said that for future generations, right?
Absolutely. He was Abdurrahman Akhtape, he was fluent in Kurmanji, of course, in Turkish at that time, Ottoman, Arabic, Persian, and then as well as Russian, Greek, and French.
Okay, can you explain more about him? Where was he from?
He was from one of the village called Akhtape. The village is in between Merdin and Ahmed.
Okay.
And it was a village. Still, a lot of people they go there. Is a whole like he has his graveyard is there, and his family is there, and was well-known religious figure at this time. And so at that time, there is one incident. The governor of my city, he received a letter that he doesn't understand what language. He asked his lieutenant governor, and he says, I do not understand. This is not the language that is from this part of the world. And then somehow Sheikh Abdurrahman heard about this, and he goes to the governor. He says, can I see that letter? I heard that you received a letter that you didn't understand and nobody understood. And he says, I don't think so. You would understand either. It's from some languages from Europe that we do not know. And he said, let me see it. Maybe I would understand. And as soon as he looked at it, he started to read and he said, oh, this is in French. That's what he means. And he says, like, how do you know French? And he says, in madrasa, we learned French, Russian, and Greek as well as those languages that we learn those languages too. And then like, some madrasas, they would teach foreign languages. Some madrasas, like for instance, Sheikh Said, he was fluent in Urdu.
Sheikh Said.
Yes.
Why?
Because at that time, one of the big school madrasa, it was at that time called Hindustan. At that time, Pakistan didn't exist, or
yes.
India didn't exist. It was Hindustan. And some of the biggest religious school, it was in that part of the world. And a lot of them, they would go there, study 3 years, 2 years or something, and learn Urdu and come back with it. So, and he was fluent in Urdu.
So Sheikh Said went to Hindustan?
I don't know if he went to Hindustan.
Or maybe he was trained by someone who...
Yeah, somebody who went there. But I knew that I read his life from Said Varoj.
Yeah.
Said Varoj wrote about his life, and he says he was fluent in Urdu. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Sheikh Said was fluent in either 7 or 8 languages. Yes.
We had a book talk, and we read Burhan Sönmez's book, Stone and Shadow. He's a Central Anatolian Kurd from Haymana, and he mentioned at the book talk last week that he's going to publish a book in Kurdish this time. So that was a great piece of news for us. So only in Kurdish. And he said that his publisher and editor just were surprised. All of a sudden, why Kurdish? Okay. So, and now it's going to be translated from Kurdish, or would be probably from Kurdish into other languages, not from Turkish that he originally wrote other novels. That was a great piece of news, really. So as a so he's as you know, he's the Pan International president of the Pan International. So that was, I mean, it's a great news for the Kurdish literature. So what about the other literary person or novelist or poets in northern Kurdistan that you could
so like, for instance, one of them would be Arjan Ari.
Okay.
Arjan Ari, he unfortunately passed away in really young age. He was from Merdin, and his poetry is beautiful. And there is I would say Rojan Barnas. There is one. It's called Rojan Barnas, and there are
Rojan Barnas. Yeah, I have heard of that title. Yeah. Okay.
And then there are so many other new poets. So it's not top of my And but there are a lot of new one, and the writers, we do have a lot of good writers. One of them, I'm pretty sure you have heard of him, Mehmet Uzun.
Yes.
He is well known by all the Kurds, and his books are great. And then I like personally, I like Frad Jawari, his books. His books are and then Hassan Mate from Bakur. He's from my city as well. Hassan Mate, he's a great novelist too. And then we go to the like Caucasus, Armenia, Georgia. We have a lot of great novelists and great poets from that region too. So I have some of their books, like the name, I'm not really great with the names, but I do read their books. Sometimes I finish the book, I don't even remember the name.
Okay. So last question, what do you think about the future of the Kurdish language? As you mentioned earlier, we have institutions in Iraq, in southern Kurdistan, in the Kurdish regional government area, right, in Iraqi Kurdistan, with universities, institutions, and government, and newspapers, and news outlets, and kids being schooled in Kurdish and so on. And then you said in Rojava, also kids being schooled in Kurdish. So how are you hopeful about the future of the Kurdish language for other parts, or just in general? And in
general, I would say some part, yes, I am. Like in Rojava now, since we start to get in like the new generation studying in this language, I have hope. And same with in Bashur, one of the mistakes, or I would say they made everybody to study in Sorani instead of like some people, they speak like Bahdini, which is Kurmanji. Instead of having them study in Bahdini, they say everybody in school, they have to learn in Sorani, which was not the correct move or approach, I would say. But in only the one that I am worried about is Bakur. Bakur is losing ground, and that's the biggest chunk of Kurdistan, and that's the biggest Kurdish population. We're losing ground in that, and a lot of like unfortunately, like my city, if you go to city center, you do not speak Kurdish. Unfortunately, you cannot get along with the natives there anymore, because a lot of them, they do not speak Kurdish anymore. The Kurdish losing ground really fast in my city. Like I'll give an example from my family. My nephew does not speak Kurdish, because even though my sister-in-law and my brother, both of them, they are fluent in Kurdish, and they grew up in the village and they know Kurdish very well, they didn't pass on to their kid. And that's because of that's like we all, when we went to school and everything, we went from trauma. It was not the ideal school settings. We were getting beaten up and everything by this because we didn't speak Turkish, and they didn't want their kids to go through that trauma. And because of that, they start to avoiding speaking Kurdish with them, and they start to using Turkish instead. And they thought like Kurdish, and a lot of them, as I say, they believe that Kurdish is just a burden on their shoulder, is not bringing them any money, or they're looking at that simple way. They're not looking at like Kurdish is their heritage, and this language has been spoken in this region for thousands of years, and they're looking at this way. And unfortunately, they do not realize that Kurdish is one of the main gate to learn European languages. In my instance, for instance, when I learned Spanish, people, they struggle with the gender. For me, gender was the easiest thing. Automatically, I didn't even know that Kurdish had gender at that time, because I grew up speaking with the gender. I didn't know that we had a gender. And then when I learned Spanish, the gender was easy for me. Automatically, I start to adopting the gender in Spanish. And people, they say, how do you do that? I say, I have no idea. Naturally, it's come to me. But later on, when I start to studying Kurdish grammar and everything, and I find out, okay, so that's because of that, the gender was extremely easy for me in Spanish. So, and a lot of other things like, for instance, perfect tenses, articles, preposition. In Kurdish, we have even more complex things like we have preposition, ambiposition or circumposition and postpositions. So a lot of languages do not have those. And that's my Kurdish very complex. And another things we have ergativity, which a lot of language doesn't have those. And that's my Kurdish very unique. So, and like the perfect tenses, for instance, a lot of people, they do not know that. Because of that, when I for instance, I was talking to my cousin when he was learning English, and I tried to explain to him perfect tenses in English. He said it doesn't click anything. So, and then I started giving him example from Kurdish. He was like, oh, that's mean this. He said, that's easy then. It's like, yeah, because he was studying English from Turkish. Turkish doesn't have really perfect tense, anything like that. And for him, it was extremely difficult. And when I introduced him, study from Kurdish, English, and he was like, wow, those are easy. And when I start to introducing him the definite and indefinite article, it made a lot of sense to him. He says, okay, all this year I was saying, okay, where should I use the and a? And now I know exactly why and how I'm using it. Because if you know the language itself already has it. And when I introduce him, it made him a lot of sense. So because your language has it, is Indo-European language, you're going to have a lot of similarity with the other languages. So, but they don't see that. And when they don't see that, they think Kurdish is just, it never moved, is a primitive language and everything. And when they tell me, I say, no, the Kurdish is advanced, but you are primitive. You cannot keep up with the Kurdish language. So
On that note, I would like to say I am hopeful because you are teaching people in the US, you're teaching Kurdish, and people are interested in Kurdish. So, and thank you very much for this interview.
thank you.
Wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.